The girl no one wanted. The spaceport was always full of noise, ships landing, engines roaring, people shouting. But in one quiet corner, far from the lights and busy shops, sat a small alien girl. Her clothes were torn. Her skin was dirty. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in months. She looked about 12 years old, but no one really knew her age. No one ever asked. People walked past her like she wasn't there. Some looked at her and turned away quickly. Others whispered cruel words as they passed. Filthy thing. Shouldn't be here. Why don't they throw her out? But she never said anything back. She just sat there, hugging her knees, eyes wide and glowing faintly blue. Then one day, Ryan passed by. Ryan was 19. He worked at the cargo docks lifting boxes and cleaning ships. He wasn't special, just a normal human boy trying to earn some money and survive on the colony. He had seen the girl before. Everyone had. But something about that day made him stop. Maybe it was the way she was shivering in the cold. Maybe it was how empty her eyes looked. Or maybe, deep down, he was just tired of seeing everyone pretend she didn't exist. He looked at the small food pack in his hand. He had saved it from lunch. Some bread and protein sticks. Nothing fancy. But he walked over to her. People nearby stopped to watch. "Hey," Ryan said softly. The girl didn't move. Ryan sat down on the floor, keeping a small distance so she wouldn't feel scared. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "You hungry?" She slowly turned her head toward him. Her eyes were strange. Not human, but not scary either. They looked tired, but also surprised. Ryan gently placed the food on the ground between them. She stared at it. "It's yours," Ryan said. "You can have it." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the bread. She sniffed it like a wild animal, unsure if it was safe. Then she ate, small bites, like she wasn't used to eating much. Ryan watched her quietly. Someone nearby whispered, "What's he doing?" "He's going to catch something." Ryan ignored them. After a few minutes, he asked, "What's your name?" The girl looked at him. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, she reached down and used her finger to draw something in the dust on the ground. "Sira." "Sira?" he asked. She nodded once. "That's a nice name," Ryan said with a small smile. Sira blinked. She looked at him like she didn't understand why he was being kind. Ryan stood up. "I'll be around," he said. "If you ever need more food, just wait here." He turned to leave, but as he walked away, someone called out, "You better stay away from that thing, boy." An older man said harshly, "That alien's bad news. One of her kind almost blew up a shuttle last year." "She's just a kid," Ryan replied calmly. The man scoffed. "Doesn't matter. They're all dangerous. Trust me." Ryan walked off, feeling a strange mix of anger and confusion. Why did everyone hate her so much? She hadn't done anything. She barely even spoke. Was being different such a crime? That night, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The next day, he returned, and she was there, in the same spot, hugging her knees again. But this time, when she saw him, something changed. She smiled. Just a little. Just enough. Ryan sat beside her again, this time with a blanket and more food. "You look cold," he said, gently placing the blanket around her shoulders. She looked at him. Her eyes seemed brighter now, even though she still didn't speak. A few moments passed in silence. Then, very softly, almost like wind, she whispered her first word. "Why?" Ryan looked at her. "Why what?" "Why? Help me," she asked. Ryan didn't answer right away. He thought about it. "Because no one else will," he finally said. "And I think you deserve better." Sira blinked again. Her small hands gripped the blanket tightly. Far away, someone watched them from behind a wall. A shadow moved silently and disappeared. Something had just started, and the world would never be the same again. They warned me to stay away. Ryan didn't expect trouble just for showing kindness, but trouble found him. It began the morning after he shared food with Sira. He walked into the cargo docks, ready for his shift, when 3 of his coworkers stood waiting by the entrance. They weren't smiling. One of them, a tall guy named Vex, stepped in front of him. "Hey Ryan," he said, voice sharp like broken glass. "We saw what you did yesterday." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" "You sat with that thing," Vex replied. "That dirty alien girl. You gave her food. You even gave her a blanket." "So?" Ryan asked, trying to move past him. Vex blocked his way. "Don't play dumb. You know the rules here. That kind doesn't belong in our colony. If the supervisors see you with her again, they'll fire you." Another worker, Mina, shook her head. "She's dangerous. They say she escaped from a secret lab. Something about energy powers. People died." Ryan sighed. "She's a kid. She was cold. She was hungry. That's all I saw." Vex leaned closer. "You're either stupid or brave. Either way, don't drag the rest of us down. Stay away from her." Ryan didn't say anything. He just walked past them. But those words followed him all day. Stay away from her. Dangerous. Doesn't belong. That night, when Ryan returned home to his small metal apartment, he found something strange. His door was scratched, like someone had tried to break in. A rock lay near the entrance, with a note tied around it. He picked it up. The note read, "A lion lovier. Stay away, or else." His stomach dropped. He looked around, but the hallway was empty. Someone had been here. Someone was watching. The next day, Ryan went to the spaceport anyway. Sira was in the same place, sitting quietly like nothing had changed. But as soon as she saw him, her eyes lit up, just for a second. She didn't smile, but she no longer looked like she expected to be ignored. Ryan sat down beside her again. This time, he brought 2 warm rice cakes and a small bottle of water. She reached for them with slow, careful hands. "You came back," she whispered. "I said I would," Ryan replied. She looked around nervously. "People don't come back." "I'm not people," he said with a small grin. But as they sat together, a group of children ran by, laughing and playing, until they saw Sira. One of them pointed at her and shouted, "Monster girl." The others started laughing. They threw a piece of trash toward her and ran away. Ryan stood up quickly, but Sira just looked down, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It's always like this," she murmured. "I don't blame them." Ryan sat back down, heart heavy. "You shouldn't have to live like this." Sira didn't answer. She just looked up at the stars. Then she spoke softly. "They're afraid of me. Even before I ran away, they were afraid." "Ran away from what?" Ryan asked gently. She didn't reply. Her glowing eyes looked distant. Suddenly, she turned to him. "If you stay near me, they'll hurt you too." "I know," he said. "Then why are you still here?" Ryan paused. He didn't have the perfect words, so he told the truth. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone, and you don't deserve to feel that way." Sira blinked. No one had ever said something like that to her before. She reached out, very slowly, and touched his hand, just for a second. But in that moment, something strange happened. A soft pulse of light traveled up his arm. Warm, gentle. It didn't hurt, but it felt different, like a quiet voice saying thank you without words. Sira pulled her hand away quickly, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "What was that?" Ryan asked. "My gift," she said. "I didn't mean to use it." "Gift?" he repeated, curious. She looked at him nervously. "If I tell you, you'll run." "No, I won't." Sira stared at him, searching his face. Then she whispered, "I see things others don't. I feel when danger is close. And when I'm scared, I can make the light move. Ryan tried to understand. Is that what happened last night? When I saw the scratch on my door. Sarah looked down. Someone followed you. I felt it. I tried to warn them off, but I don't have control yet. You protected me, he asked. She nodded slowly. Ryan sat back, stunned. They think you're dangerous, but you're the one being hunted. Sarah's voice was soft, but firm. If they find me, they'll take me back. I'll disappear forever. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her voice in his mind. If they find me, I'll disappear forever. He looked out the small window of his apartment, watching the night sky. Stars blinked quietly in the dark. Somewhere out there, someone had created Sarah. Someone had hurt her. And now they were coming. But for the first time in her life, someone had stayed. And for Ryan, turning away wasn't an option anymore. The secret she was hiding. Ryan walked carefully through the quiet alley near the spaceport. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft purple and blue. His hands held a small thermal bag. Inside were 2 warm rolls and a sealed water bottle. He didn't know why he kept coming back. Maybe it was because Sarah reminded him of someone. Or maybe, deep inside, he knew she didn't belong in the dust like garbage. She was something more. Something hidden. He turned the corner and froze. Sarah wasn't there. Her spot was empty. The blanket was missing. No sign of her at all. Panic rose in his chest. He looked around quickly, heart pounding. Had someone taken her? Then, just beyond the shipping crates, he heard a soft sound. A whisper. A rustle. Like someone breathing hard. Ryan followed the sound and found her crouched behind a pile of scrap metal, clutching her arms, her back against the wall. Her body was shaking. Sarah, he said, rushing forward. She looked up. Her eyes were glowing brighter than usual. But not from fear. This time, they were full of pain. Sarah, what happened? He asked, kneeling beside her. They came, she whispered. They were looking for me. I felt them before they got close. Ryan's hands tightened on the food bag. Who? What do you mean? Sarah's voice was low, like a secret the night didn't want to hear. They wear black suits. They smell like burning metal. They're not normal humans. They are from the lab. They call themselves cleaners. Her body trembled. If they find me, they'll erase me, like I never existed. Ryan didn't fully understand, but his instincts screamed that she was telling the truth. Come with me, he said. You can't stay out here tonight. Sarah looked at him, unsure. Where? My apartment. It's not much, but it's safe. She hesitated, but after a moment, she nodded slowly. That night, Sarah sat quietly on Ryan's old couch. She didn't touch anything. She looked like a shadow in the corner, too afraid to relax. Ryan gave her a towel and showed her the small shower. When she came out, she was clean for the first time. Her dark silver hair was long and straight, her skin pale but beautiful in the soft light. But what shocked Ryan most were the marks on her back. Lines. Symbols. Like someone had carved glowing patterns into her skin, but instead of blood, the lines shimmered with light. She caught him staring and quickly pulled the old shirt over her back. What are those? He asked softly. Sarah looked away. They made them. The people in the lab. They said it would help them control me. But it didn't work. Control you? Ryan's voice was quiet. She nodded. They wanted me to be a weapon. A living tool. They tested me every day. Lights. Sound. Pain. Always pain. Ryan sat on the floor, across from her. How did you escape? Sarah closed her eyes, remembering. There was a boy, she said. A young guard. He gave me water when no one was looking. One day, he left the door open. I ran. I think he died for that. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Sarah spoke again. They called me Subject 9, but that's not my name. My real name is Sira. Ryan nodded. I know. You told me the first day we met. I never told anyone before you, she said. Only wrote it in the dirt. But you said it like it mattered. It does matter, Ryan said gently. You matter. She looked at him for a long time, as if trying to believe it. Then, without warning, the power flickered. The lights blinked twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Ryan stood up fast, moving toward the window. That's not normal, he said. The grid in this building's solid. Sira stood too, her breathing sharp. They're here, she whispered. A low hum echoed outside, like a quiet engine charging up. Ryan peeked through the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see. A dark figure stood near the far building, not moving, not breathing, just watching. A second figure appeared beside it, then a third. Stay down, Ryan whispered, pulling Sira away from the window. Her eyes flashed with fear, but also fire. They're using a signal blocker, she said. They'll shut everything down, then come in fast. You said you can feel danger, Ryan asked quickly. Can you do anything else? Sira clenched her fists. I can bend light, but only for a few seconds. That's enough, Ryan said. He handed her a bag and whispered, Go up the back. There's a drain tunnel. I'll distract them. You run. Sira shook her head. They'll hurt you. Let them try, Ryan said. This is my home. I won't let them take you. She stared at him like he was something rare, something not from this world. I don't understand you, she said. You don't have to, Ryan replied. Just trust me. And then he opened the door. The night outside was silent, but in the shadows, danger waited. Sira slipped through the back, her light beginning to glow faintly again, this time not from fear, but from hope, and the secret she had tried so hard to hide. It was just the beginning. The hunters are coming. Ryan's feet pounded against the metal hallway as he ran. The sound of heavy boots behind him echoed through the building like thunder. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. He had to buy her time. The moment he had opened the front door, the hunters moved, fast, silent, and full of purpose. They weren't ordinary soldiers. They didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. They just chased. Ryan had only one thought in his mind. Sira must escape. He turned a sharp corner and slid down a narrow service shaft. Behind him, a laser shot hit the wall, sparking metal and smoke. He rolled to the bottom and lay still, holding his breath. Footsteps passed above. For now, they had lost him. Far from the chaos, Sira crouched inside the narrow tunnel behind the apartment building. The tunnel was cold, wet, and smelled like rust. But she didn't care. It was dark, perfect for her to hide. She moved slowly through the tight space, her glowing eyes helping her see. Her fingers brushed against the wall as she walked. Suddenly, she stopped. Her body tensed. Something was wrong. Not just danger, a pulse. She could feel it, faint waves moving through the ground, like the colony itself was warning her. They're calling in drones, she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed her hand against the wall. A soft light spread from her skin. The wall shimmered, then faded into shadow. It was one of her hidden gifts. She could mask herself in light. It would last only a minute, maybe less. But in that minute, a drone flew right past the tunnel without stopping. She waited in silence. Then she moved again. Back near the docks, Ryan stumbled into an old storage room. He slammed the door shut and leaned against it, breathing hard. His hand went to his communicator. He clicked the emergency signal. No response. Of course. The hunters had already jammed the signal. He looked around the room. It was full of old tools, dusty boxes, and power cells. But in the corner, something caught his eye. An old scooter bike. Battery low, but maybe enough for one ride. He had an idea. Meanwhile, inside the forest beyond the colony's edge, Sira reached a clearing and collapsed on her knees. She had run for miles. Her power was fading. She touched the marks on her arms. Those glowing lines the lab people had carved into her. They were burning now, like fire inside her blood. She had pushed too hard. Her eyes closed. But in the darkness of her mind, a voice came. Not a real voice, but a memory. A woman's voice. Kind, strong. You were born of light. You are not a mistake. You are a beginning. Sira gasped and opened her eyes. It wasn't a memory from the lab. It was older. From before. A time she had forgotten. In the colony, alarms started to ring. Not from the police, but from private security towers. The hunters had triggered something. The colony's main server recognized the threat as unauthorized movement by off-record agents. A silent alarm was sent to someone watching from far above. A man in a black coat leaned over a screen and smiled. She's still alive, he said to himself, and someone is protecting her. He stood up and turned to his assistant. Prepare the ship. I'm going in. Back in the forest, Ryan reached the clearing on the half-dead scooter. His face was covered in dirt, and his arms had cuts from branches. But when he saw Sira on the ground, he ran to her. Sira, he shouted. She looked up slowly, weak but awake. You found me, she whispered. Always, he said, dropping to his knees. We have to keep moving. She shook her head. They'll find us anywhere. Ryan grabbed her hands. Then we run until they can't. But Sira wasn't sure she could even stand. Her body was too tired. Her powers too unstable. Then she heard something. A voice in her mind. Clear. Strong. You're not alone anymore. And she believed it. She stood. Hours passed. The two of them found a hidden cave inside the mountain ridge. It was cold, but quiet. Ryan started a small fire. They sat beside it, silent. Outside, the stars filled the sky. Sira looked up. Why are they hunting me? She asked. Ryan stared into the flames. Because they're afraid of what you are, of what you could become. Sira turned to him. And what's that? He looked into her glowing eyes. A leader, a fighter, a light in a very dark world. She said nothing, but a tear slid down her cheek. No one had ever said that to her, not even in dreams. Far away, the man in the black coat stepped off his ship. The colony gates opened for him, though no one knew his name. His boots hit the ground softly. He smiled. The hunt is over, he said. But the real game is just beginning. The underground truth. The cave was silent, but the fire cracked softly between them. Sira sat with her knees pulled close to her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the flames, but her mind was far away. Ryan sat across from her, watching, waiting, not speaking. He knew she was tired. He knew she was scared. But he also knew she was changing. Something inside her had started to wake up. Sira, he said gently, you should sleep. I can't, she whispered. Because of them. She shook her head. Because of me. Ryan frowned. What do you mean? Sira opened her hand and looked at her palm. Faint light swirled under her skin, like stars trapped in glass. When I use my powers, she said, something opens, something I don't understand. I feel memories. But they aren't mine. At least, I don't think so. Ryan leaned closer. Whose memories? She looked up, her voice barely a breath. My mother's. At sunrise, Ryan woke to the sound of footsteps outside the cave. Not heavy, not fast, careful. He jumped up, ready to defend them. But before he could move, a voice called softly. We mean no harm. Ryan narrowed his eyes. A tall figure stepped into the light. It was an alien woman, slender, cloaked in layers of worn cloth, her eyes the same glowing blue as Sira's. Behind her stood 5 more, old, young, Male, female, each one different, but each one watching Sira with quiet wonder. Sira stood slowly, confused. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward and bowed her head. "We are what's left of your people," she said. They led Sira and Ryan down a hidden path, through thick forest and stone, into a cave that opened into a vast underground chamber. There dozens of alien beings lived in silence, building, cooking, teaching children, hiding from the world above. Sira stood frozen. "I thought they were all gone," she whispered. The tall woman smiled. "Not gone. Hidden." Ryan looked around in shock. "How have you stayed down here so long?" "The colony scanners. They do not scan where they are told not to scan," the woman said. "The government knows we exist. They just pretend we don't." Sira's voice was sharp. "Why?" The woman looked at her with heavy eyes. "Because your kind was never meant to survive." In a quiet chamber lit by glowing stones, the woman told them everything. Many years ago, Sira's people came to the colony seeking peace. They were called the Lumerians, known for their deep connection to light energy. Their gifts were seen as beautiful and dangerous. At first, humans welcomed them, traded with them, learned from them. But then came the fear. Some humans wanted the power of the Lumerians. Others wanted control. So a secret program began, led by scientists in black labs, funded by those who wanted weapons. The Lumerians were tricked, taken, marked, tested. Most didn't survive. Some escaped into hiding. Others were born in the labs. Sira's eyes widened. "You mean?" The woman nodded. "You are not just one of us. You are the child of a stolen mother, a child of light born in darkness." Sira sat still, shaking. "Then I was never meant to be free." "No," the woman said. "You were meant to lead." She showed Sira an ancient scroll. On it was a symbol, 3 stars in a circle, the same pattern carved into Sira's back. "It is not just a mark," the woman said. "It is the royal sign of the Lumerians. You carry the blood of the last Lightborn queen." Ryan stared at Sira in awe. "You're not just powerful," he said softly. "You're important." Sira turned to him. "But I don't feel strong. I feel broken." The woman smiled gently. "Even broken stars still shine." That night, Sira walked through the underground village alone. Children peeked at her from behind walls. Elders nodded in respect. For the first time in her life, she wasn't seen as a mistake. She was seen as hope. She found Ryan sitting by the edge of an underground pool. He looked up as she approached. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." "You don't have to figure it all out today," he said. "Just don't give up." She sat beside him, watching her reflection ripple in the water. "I want to protect them," she said. "All of them, even the humans who hate me. I want to be more than what they made me." Ryan smiled. "Then you already are." Suddenly, a deep hum filled the air. Sira stood, alert. So did Ryan. The leader rushed toward them. "They found us." Up above, black ships hovered in silence. Lights beamed down. The hunters had traced Sira's energy trail. But they weren't the only ones coming. From the stars above, a different ship entered the colony's airspace, marked with no flag, silent as a ghost. Inside stood the man in the black coat. He looked down at the ground below and said just 4 words. "Bring me the girl." The great escape. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Sira stood at the entrance of the underground village, staring at the ceiling above. Dust rained down from the stone as loud vibrations shook the walls. "They found us," she whispered. Ryan stood beside her, his fists clenched. "What do we do?" he asked. The tall alien woman, the elder who had revealed the truth, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but firm. "We delay them. You escape." Sira turned to her quickly. "We can't just leave you here." "You must," the woman said. "You are the last Lightborn. If they catch you, everything ends. Sira shook her head. No, I'm not a queen. I'm not a leader. The elder stepped closer and placed a hand over Sarah's chest. But your heart shines, even in fear. That is enough. Suddenly, a loud blast shook the chamber. A large piece of the ceiling cracked. One of the Lumerians shouted, "They're breaking through." A child cried in the distance. Sarah took a deep breath. Her body felt heavy, but something inside her had changed. She didn't want to run anymore. She wanted to fight. But she knew this wasn't the right place. Not yet. She turned to Rian. "We have to get to the launch bay." He nodded. "There's an old cargo shuttle hidden near the outer cliffs. I can get us there." The elder quickly gave Sira a glowing crystal. "This will guide you when your power fades. And remember, you are not alone." Then she pressed a small button on the wall. A secret path opened, tight, narrow, leading upward through rock. Ryan grabbed Sarah's hand. "Let's go." They ran. Behind them, the hunters broke through the stone ceiling with laser drills and gravity hammers. Black armored figures dropped down, their red visors glowing. The elder raised her arms. A wave of shimmering light formed in front of her, blocking their path. One hunter aimed a weapon. The elder smiled. "You will not take her." Then everything turned white. Above ground, Ryan and Sira burst out of the tunnel into the cold morning air. The colony looked different now. Quiet, tense. Even the sky seemed darker. They ran through back alleys and empty streets, hiding from security drones flying overhead. "They must have shut down the main systems," Ryan said, out of breath. "No alarms. No police. They've taken full control." Sarah didn't reply. Her eyes were glowing again, brighter than ever. She could feel the hunters closing in. Every step made her power burn hotter. Every shadow whispered danger. But she kept running. They reached the cliffs as the first black ship descended above them. It hovered in silence, blocking the sun. Ryan pointed to a pile of rocks near the edge. There, the shuttle. They ran to it, pulling away the camouflage tarp. The ship was old, rusty, and barely holding together. But it was enough. Ryan jumped into the pilot's seat and started flipping switches. "Power cells are low, but maybe we can make it out of orbit." Sira stood at the ramp, looking back at the path behind them. Her hands began to shake. "We can't just leave them behind," she whispered. "We're not leaving forever," Ryan said. "We're leaving to survive." Another ship landed behind them with a heavy thud. The ramp opened slowly. From the shadows, the man in the black coat stepped out. His face was pale, eyes sharp and cold. He didn't carry a weapon, but he didn't need one. Sira froze. She remembered his voice. He was there in the lab. He gave the orders. He was the one who named her Subject 9. "Hello again," the man said, stepping closer. "You've grown stronger than I expected." Ryan stood in front of Sira. "Stay back." The man smiled. "And you must be the hero, the little human who thinks kindness can protect her." Sira's power flared. Her skin began to glow. The man didn't blink. "You don't know who you are, child. But I do. You were built to be mine." Sira stepped forward. "You don't own me. You were made in my lab. From royal blood and light energy. You are the weapon I spent years creating." "I'm not a weapon," she said firmly. "I'm a person." The man raised a small device. Sira gasped and fell to her knees, her body shaking. The marks on her arms lit up in pain. The device was calling to her, controlling her. "Sira." Ryan ran to her side, holding her close. The man stepped closer, calm as ever. "You cannot run from what you are." But then something strange happened. The crystal the elder had given her began to glow in Ryan's pocket. Sira reached for it. Light exploded in all directions. The device short-circuited and sparked in the man's hand. He stumbled back. Sira stood, her body now fully glowing like a star reborn. "You tried to break me," she said, "but you only woke me up." She raised her hands. Light poured from her palms, blasting the ground around them. The hunters nearby fell to their knees, blinded. The black ship began to shake. Syrah turned to Ryan. "Now, go." They ran into the shuttle. Ryan powered the engines. "Hold on." The ship blasted upward, barely missing the edge of the cliff. Syrah collapsed in the passenger seat, breathing hard. "You did it," Ryan said, but she shook her head. "No, we did." From below, the man watched the ship disappear into the sky. His hand was burned, and his eyes full of fury. "She's stronger than I thought," he said. Then he smiled darkly. But no one escapes forever. She was never just a dirty girl. The stars outside the shuttle window were quiet and endless. Syrah sat by the small round window, her head resting on her arm. Her skin no longer glowed, and her breathing was slow, almost silent. The escape had drained her, but she was alive, and she was free. Behind her, Ryan adjusted the controls of the old shuttle. The ship wobbled slightly, but they had made it off the colony. For now, the black ships had stopped chasing them. The galaxy opened wide in front of them. Ryan turned in his seat. "We're safe. For now." Syrah didn't move. Her voice was soft. "I never thought I'd see the stars like this." "You belong out here," Ryan said. "You were never meant to stay hidden." Syrah turned to him, her eyes tired but filled with a calm strength. "Then why did I feel like a shadow all my life?" Ryan leaned back. "Because they were afraid of your light." She smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did." Ryan shrugged. "It wasn't hard. You just needed someone to look closer." The shuttle landed on a quiet moon, far from the colony systems. It was a peaceful place, a hidden refuge once used by rebels during the old wars. Now it was just a memory wrapped in silence. They stayed there for a while. Syrah began to heal. Each day, she walked a little farther. Her energy returned. Her strength returned. Her light began to flicker again. Not wild, not unstable, but steady and calm. Ryan built a small shelter from scrap parts. He set up solar panels, grew food from starter packs, and protected the landing site. They worked together. They laughed. They found peace. But Syrah knew it wouldn't last forever. One evening, Ryan found her sitting by the edge of a cliff, watching the sky. He sat beside her and said nothing. For a long time, they just watched the stars. Then Syrah spoke. "I remember something my mother once whispered to me. Before the lab. Before everything." Ryan looked at her. "What was it?" She said, "Never forget your name, even when the world tries to erase it." Syrah paused, then added, "I didn't understand it then. I do now." She turned to him, voice steady. "My name isn't Subject 9. It's Syrah Leora, daughter of the last Lightborn Queen. And I'm not running anymore." Ryan smiled. "So what happens now?" Syrah stood. "I go back." Ryan stood too. "What?" "I go back," she repeated, "not to hide, not to fight with hate, but to speak, to show the galaxy what was buried, to tell the truth." She looked into his eyes. "I want them to know I'm not just the dirty alien girl they try to erase." Weeks later, a strange broadcast began to spread across colony networks. It wasn't sent by the government. It wasn't sent by pirates or rebels. It came from the stars. A clear voice, a glowing face. Syrah stood in front of a galaxy map. Her markings glowed gently, but her tone was calm, human-like, kind. "My name is Syrah Leora," she said. "I was once a number. I was once hidden. I was once told I didn't matter. But I survived. And now I speak for those who can't." She told the truth about the labs, about the hunters, about the Lumerians who were stolen, silenced, and erased, about the kindness of one human who changed everything. She didn't call for war. She called for peace, for unity, for a future where humans and Lemurians, and every other kind, could live without fear of each other. The broadcast went viral. Across colonies, people whispered her name. Some called her dangerous, but more called her brave. More called her hope. Back on the moon, Syrah and Ryan stood near the shuttle. A large ship was approaching, a transport from a new alliance of rebels, exiles, and peaceful leaders. They had seen her message, and they wanted to meet the girl who started it all. Ryan turned to her. "Are you ready?" Syrah nodded. "I've never been more ready." He smiled. "You sure you don't want to just hide here forever and grow tomatoes?" She laughed softly. "Maybe one day, but not yet." As the ship landed, wind blew through her hair. She closed her eyes. She could still feel the cold dirt from the spaceport floor. She remembered how people turned away, how they whispered, how they threw garbage at her. But now they would know the truth. She was never just a dirty alien girl. She was a queen, a leader, a light that could not be ignored. And it all started with one small act of kindness. One human who chose to sit down instead of walk away. One voice who saw her, not as a thing to avoid, but as someone who mattered.